This story contains graphic content detailing a sexual assault. Due to the subject matter, this passage is appropriate for mature audiences only. Beautiful. This is the Bible's reference for Tamar, the daughter of King David. Tamar was the sister of Absalom, whom the Bible depicts as the most beautiful man in the kingdom. The siblings' half-brother Amnon was deeply infatuated with the beautiful woman. As his infatuation with her grew, he began to make himself sick with desiring her. Day and night, night and day, his thoughts always seemed to bring her to his mind. There was no way he could deny it. He was obsessed. He knew he had to have her, but how? Amnon had a close friendship with his cousin, Jonadab. Being a very intuitive young man, he quickly recognized something was seriously disturbing the young prince. Seeing his distress, he asked him what was bothering him. After some serious probing, he eventually told him everything. Jonadab was a highly intelligent man who was especially cunning. He developed a ruse to give Amnon a chance to spend some time alone with the beautiful Tamar. Who knows? Maybe she felt the same way about him. Maybe all the two needed was an opportunity. If Amnon told her how he felt, it could possibly help her admit the feelings that she had for him, and nature would take its course. Delighted, he put the plan into action. One thing the prince knew for certain was after his private encounter with the young maid, he was determined to have her. Amnon pretended to be ill, and when King David heard the news, he came to visit his son. When the king looked at him, he became greatly concerned because the young man looked and sounded pitiful. The young prince complained he needed help. Dissatisfied with the help he was already receiving from his hired staff, maybe he would feel better if someone close to home was able to support him in his time of need. King David agreed. But who? They both thought for a moment. Then the prince casually suggested, "Father, what about Tamar? Do you think you could send her over to help me? Maybe she could cook for me and help nurse me back to health." Thinking for a moment, David happily agreed. He unknowingly sent his daughter to the prince's home, unaware of the plot the two had concocted. The moment Amnon saw Tamar step into his home, his heart skipped a beat. There she was, with radiant skin, beautifully delicate features, and hair that spilled down her back. Immediately, his nostrils were inflamed with the smell of her alluring perfume. He envisioned her hourglass figure that was hidden underneath her luxurious garments. Her gown was covered with the most magnificent hues. It was beautifully and artistically crafted with the most beautiful accents. The special attention and detail to her garment signified her purity. It was customary for the king's virgin daughters to be dressed this way. As Tamar looked at her older brother, she was filled with compassion. He appeared to be terribly sick. Immediately, the young woman sprang into action. The house was instantly scented with the most delicious aromas. He patiently watched as his sister tenderly labored over his food. Once her task was complete, the prince ordered everyone to leave. Everyone except Tamar. She placed the food on the table and prepared to feed him, but her brother interrupted her, saying, "No, Tamar, I'm too weak to eat out here. I think I'd feel better if I lay down in my bed and ate. You can feed me there." In his condition, it seemed like a reasonable request. She obeyed. Amnon could barely contain his excitement. But once the two were in the bedroom alone, he dropped the ruse of being sick and tried to seduce her. First, he made eloquent professions of love to her while he gave her one unwanted kiss after another, followed by stolen touches. Tamar begged Amnon to stop, but he continued undeterred, hoping that what he was hearing were just playful protests. He reasoned she had to know how much he wanted her, and somewhere deep down, he believed that she wanted him too. Terror set in as she realized she was alone with Amnon in the house. Tamar couldn't believe what was happening. Frantically, she continued trying to plead with her brother. She tried to make him see the shame and dishonor he would bring upon them both if he committed this treacherous act. When she saw that pleading didn't work, next she tried logic. If you really want me, ask our father, the king. He will give me to you in marriage. But there was no reasoning with him. She made her final plea. Amnon, please, don't do this. He refused to listen to her cries, protests, or her refusals. His decision was already made. Her words fell on deaf ears. He overpowered her, held her down, and despite her tears and screams, he removed her beautiful virgin gown and raped her. How? How could this have happened to her? She wondered to herself. Numb as she lay there being violated by her brother, she suddenly realized the whole thing was an elaborate trick to assault her. But why? Why would her brother ask her for her help and then brutally rape her? It didn't make any sense. She came into his home to help him, and he betrayed her. Amnon had wanted her so much, he forced himself to believe she wanted him too. He knew she was a virgin. Maybe she just needed some sort of protest so she wouldn't appear to be easy. He believed if she had any doubts about sleeping with him, he had certainly changed her mind. He thought her pushes and her pulls were feigned protest. The scratches that she left on his arms, chest, and back, he imagined were ignited from a night of passion. But when the heinous act was over, he saw the pained expression in her eyes, the very real tears that streamed down her face, the shame, fear, and nakedness she truly felt washed over him in waves. The evidence of her stolen virginity lay in between them on the bed. What he did was shameful, and he knew it. Guilt began to overtake him, and now all of the passion, desire, and lust he once felt for her was now replaced with even greater contempt. He now hated her more than he ever desired her. Amnon was highly offended. How could she not want him? After all this time he had spent pining away for her, everything he had done to have her, and she rejected him. Incredible. How could she do this to him? Was it someone else? He didn't know what the reason for her refusing his advances was, but he hated her for it, and he was going to make sure she knew it. Coldly and menacingly, he looked at her bare frame up and down and mentally discarded her as if she were yesterday's trash. His fiery eyes shot daggers at her as he glared at her with all the malice he could muster. In disbelief, she stared back at him, and as she desperately searched his eyes for answers, she could see there was nothing but hatred for her there. Immediately, he got up and shouted, "Get up and get out!" She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Panicked, her mind frantically raced back and forth. What would everyone think of her? What would people say? Who would want her now? What chance did she have for marriage? She felt ruined. How could he rape her and then throw her away like a piece of trash? Feeling trapped by her circumstance, she tried to explain to him that his treatment of her after the rape was worse than the rape itself. But Amnon refused to listen. He didn't understand her feelings, and he didn't care. He felt rejected, and to him, that was all that mattered. Again, he ordered her to get dressed and leave. She put on her clothes, but refused to go. She wanted nothing more than to exit, but where could she find an escape? Where could she go now? Who would have her? Hearing his servant return to his home, the prince devilishly smiled as he summoned the man to his room. "Throw this woman out of my house and lock the door behind her." Puzzled by the command, the servant wasn't sure what to do. He wasn't accustomed to forcibly escorting a princess. The servant was unaware of what transpired between the two. But he could see that whatever it was, this beautiful young woman who had come to help nurse the prince back to health just a short while ago was now distraught with tears. Was she hurt? Did the young lady need help? What could she have done to infuriate the prince so? He must have wondered. It was obvious something had greatly disturbed the young woman. Yet, the man quickly brushed his concerns aside and decided that whatever it was none of his business. His boss had given him a task to do, and he must do it. He grabbed the beautiful woman with her messy hair, wrinkled clothes, tears running down her face, and despite her begging and pleading, he forced her out of the house and locked the door behind her. As she stood outside Amnon's house, beating on the door, trying to get back inside, she was met with silence. The harsh reality that her brother had deceived her, betrayed her trust, raped her, and now had cruelly thrown her away began to settle in. Turning away from the door, she bent down and irreverently began to grab handfuls of dirt and poured them over her. The soil covered the top of her tousled hair. It streaked down her face and now damaged her lovely gown. As she wiped the dirt-covered hands on her soiled dress, her hands ran across her long, beautiful sleeves. Her garment reminded her of what she lost just a brief while ago, and she angrily ripped her dress as she bitterly wept. Absent-mindedly, she wandered away from Amnon's house, feeling abused, rejected, naked, and betrayed. She was found by her older brother Absalom, who demanded to know what happened to her. The two were very close, and he loved his little sister dearly. Overcome with grief, she told him everything. He tried his best to comfort her, but there was nothing he could say or do to console her. She refused to be comforted. He brought her to his home to live with him. She remained secluded in her brother's house, depressed, broken, and naked in her sorrow. Absalom was enraged. He could think of nothing else but avenging Tamar. David was upset, but he didn't do anything about it. Absalom did nothing but quietly seethe for 2 years. At the end of the 2 years, he decided to throw a banquet, and he invited his brothers, Amnon too. They all graciously accepted the invitation. But during the banqueting, the tone of the party changed abruptly when Absalom's servant killed Amnon at Absalom's request. The party was a ploy to get Amnon to his home so he could be killed. His surviving brothers fled in terror for their lives. Absalom waged war against his father and his father's household. I am not writing this to condone violence, but merely recounting the acts as they transpired. The truth is, you reap what you sow. God says vengeance belongs to him. He will repay.